Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
How you doing?
I can't complain.
Okay.
Can't complain. Nobody wants to hear it anyway, so.
Uh,
Yeah,
I'll say any of these winter days when we have sunshine like this, I am happy.
yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. I was telling somebody the other day, they were just rejoicing over the warm weather. I said, it's not gonna last. This is Cincinnati. It's not gonna last. So, don't get out your shorts and your flip-flops just yet because it's not gonna last.
Right? Yes. My daughter the other day was like, do I have any shorts that fit from last year? I want to wear shorts tomorrow. And I was like, I do understand it was 70 degrees today, but it's supposed to be 32 tomorrow. She was like,
Right,
what?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it's hard for me to believe that there's one school I'm working with where spring break is coming up in the next 2 weeks. And then I know Cincinnati spring break will be near the end of
Yes.
March,
Yep. Yeah. We're the last week. Yep.
I tell you.
I know. I
And
know.
then it's almost over. It's hard to believe. It really is.
I know it's true. We're just like cruising into the spring here.
Yeah.
What's almost over? I missed that.
The school year.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Erin. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I see. Great. I think we've got. Oh, great. All right. So I think I know we've got a lot to cover today. So I think there will probably be other people potentially hopping on. But want to make sure we use all of our time wisely. And so really excited that, so as you saw on the agenda, that we'll be spending most of our time today talking with Erin about the data and our analysis of all of the new programming we did last year. And so kind of before we dive into that, I thought maybe we could each just introduce ourselves, because I know Erin's been on lots of different calls, but maybe has not met everybody yet. So we can each introduce ourselves. And then as just like a framing for this, I think everybody here knows, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, is we know last year we did not accept a class 6 because we were doing so much new programming, right? So we ran the election awareness campaign. We had our first ever day-long conference. We did this series of public sessions. There was so much other new work happening. And so we are incredibly grateful that we've been partnering with Erin for years, and she knows we don't just go around doing stuff. We want to make sure the stuff we're doing is actually leading to the outcomes we care about for kids in our community. And so one of the things with all of this work, one of the big questions we were asking was, okay, we know we can probably teach people stuff in an hour virtually or in a day, but are they going to actually do anything, right? Like we say all the time, like that's great if you learn something, adult, but like that doesn't change outcomes for kids. You actually have to do something with what you've learned. And so that was part of the questions that Erin was working with us on, is like, how would we figure out if people are more likely to take an action? So you'll see that was like a big part of this data collection we were doing as well. So really excited to hear your all's reflections. I know we sent you all of these reports, and to hear Erin walk through it. So with that context, maybe we could just go around and have everybody just introduce themselves real quick. Maybe tell us your name, how you're connected to school board school, and like maybe what you do for your day job, because that's all interesting stuff. Rubina, you're at the top of my screen, so do you want to go first?
Yeah, morning, everyone. I'm Rubina. I was part of class 3. And then I know Erin because I filled out a ton of surveys as a participant in class 3. So I'm very familiar. And then my day job is I work for Cincinnati Youth Collaborative, running their internship and workforce development efforts.
Thanks. And Rubina's been on our program committee for a couple of years now. Great. Dr. Dantley.
I'm Michael Dantley, and I'm on the board. I'm a new member on the board and excited to be a part of School Board School. My day job, I'm a pastor at Christ Emmanuel Christian Fellowship for close to 50 years in June, and I'm also an educational consultant and leadership coach.
Thank you. Leslie.
Leslie Maloney, recently retired, well, not 2 years actually, next month, from the Hale Foundation, and where I oversaw education investments. And I have to say that I met with Elisa when this was literally a twinkle in her eye. Having just come off of the CPS school board, she was frustrated and wanted to do something about them not really understanding the role of the board with respect to both the district and really the community. So here we are today, hopefully about to run class 6.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Leslie. How about Maya?
I'm Maya. I'm the Director of Program and Communications here at School Board School. So I ran most of the new programming this past year, and I'm excited to see the data again.
And Maya was in class 3. Yes. All right. Andrea?
Hi, everybody. Class 5 here. I joined School Board School in September, and I am working with our members, and so we'll be involved in any programming with our members specifically as we keep on moving.
Great. And how about Tammy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tammy Bennett, and I'm Vice President for Inclusive Excellence in Philanthropy at the University of Cincinnati, and I am also an adjunct professor of law at UC's College of Law. And I've been on the board of School Board School for, I think, about a year now.
Thank you. And Erin, I think everybody knows you, but if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll just turn it over to you and you can take it away.
Perfect. Good to see you all this morning. I always love speaking to anyone involved with School Board School. And, typically I present to the full board, and then Elisa's like, I have a subcommittee that's like even more into data. Would you like to speak to them? And I was like, yes, please. So I'm super excited to be here. My name is Erin Green. My full-time job is I'm a professor at UC in the Department of Psychology. I run the undergraduate program. So, really invested in in higher ed. My kids are in the CPS system. I have 3 kids, a first, fourth, and 8th grader now. So it's been just a joy to be a part of School Board School since year 2. And I was thinking about doing this presentation this morning, and it's fun to think about how it's evolved. Like Elisa said, at the beginning, we were just trying to kind of count things and get feedback to make things better. And now we really have done this full shift, which we're seeing, in the world of nonprofits and the world of evaluation as well. It's not just what are we doing, but what is the impact of what we're doing. And so I'm going to talk about the 2 new kind of programming streams that came on this year. Realize this is the first time we're evaluating them, so we did our best. I think I know I learned a lot about how to better do this in the future. A lot of it has to do around the actual data collection. The data was often very difficult to get and clean and all that kind of stuff because it's just very different than what we normally do. We don't have as much control over it. The surveys aren't coming directly from me. They're coming from a lot of times other organizations. So you'll see some of that messiness in here that I like to say isn't typical of me in terms of, when we do evaluations at this point for the learning program, we've got it pretty tight. We, kind of know what to expect and how to do it. And this has been I will say like a joyful challenge to try to figure out how we're going to really measure this. So I appreciate the opportunity to do it. So I'm going to talk through these 2 new programming streams, and I'm going to talk for each of them separately about 3 parts. We're going to start by just talking about like kind of who was there, who received it. And we'll look at that, in terms of numbers of people served. In some cases, we have information of where in the United States they came from. which is really interesting. It's very different than what we've been looking at for the more local learning program information. Then the next part is we're going to look at what did they gain? What did they learn? What confidence did they build? All that kind of stuff from the beginning of the experience to the end of the experience. And I feel like even when we used to just measure that felt big. I mean, that a lot of programs don't even think about that. How have we moved the needle in terms of people's, knowledge, opinions, abilities, all that kind of stuff. But what's cool is even though this is the first time we're going through this evaluation, we've really shifted the focus of the evaluation to not just, oh, they learned more and they know more now and they're more confident now, but what did they do because of it? And so we've got some really, I think, amazing, I mean, quite frankly, information about how people are using all of this, even with very short interventions, in really important ways to create that end goal, which is system change. So I've put together a short PowerPoint presentation, and I've tried to leave a lot of time for questions as well, although it does not, because I do this all the time, questions in between do not rattle me anymore. So if you have a question, feel free to just jump in and tell me. That used to really I'd be like, oh, please save all questions for the end so I don't lose my train of thought. But that's the joy of, as Tammy knows, when you're in front of a group of people, you got to be able to figure out how to think on your feet. So I can't even imagine teaching in the law school how overwhelming that would be, knowing they're all looking at me with their little lawyer eyes. So what I'm going to do in this presentation, figure out how to forward it. Okay. Is to first go through the public information sessions, which were a series of 7, pretty short interventions that happened remotely online. So this is the one where you'll see it reached people from all over. And then the second part is we'll talk about the Advocate for Education Day at the conference. So for the public information sessions, there were 7 sessions. They were held basically, the first half of last year, from January through June 2023. I know that this evaluation data is a little delayed. One thing that I think I could do better is to give feedback as we go, but because this was a new system, we just weren't entirely sure what the evaluation was going to look like. But by the end, we had a system down. So you can see there were 7 different topics. A lot of them are, they all have different names, but I love that it evolved from the February, what does a school board do, to the April, what the heck does a school board do? And it'd be interesting to dive into that and see if people were more intrigued by the second title versus the first title. And so, they cover a range of topics, but topics that School Board School does an excellent job of, right? These are all things that are covered in the learning program, and that we know with that more intensive 6-month experience, our members get really good at. So now's the chance to see, can we give people a small dose of this in a way that they could come to one of these, they could come to all of these, and what might that look like? So we basically had 3 we used 3 data sources for this in our methodology. We had, when people registered for these public information sessions, they gave us some information, typically their name, their zip code. In the best case scenario, they answered some pre-test questions around what do they know right now. Then at the end of the sessions, we had them answer some additional questions. So if they asked those pre-questions, then we followed up and said, okay, where are you now on these metrics? And then the thing that I love the most about School Board School is that you all realize that when you're done with the session and you report your knowledge, that's not the end of how you actually use it. That in fact, it takes some time to kind of simmer and stew and, and you're going to take that knowledge and and other knowledge that and other abilities and other skills and other, all this. And it's going to kind of create a synergy. And so in order to measure that, we reached back out to all the people who had attended, actually who had even registered for one session, and asked them some questions. If they registered and didn't attend, why did that happen? So that Maya has that information for programming purposes. And if they registered and attended, give us some more information about your experience. So these numbers are way different than when we're dealing with a member class, right? A learning program class that, there were almost 1,500 people registered across the 7 sessions. Like I said, school handled some registrations. External partners handled some registrations. So the information we got from those was a little varied. But we had about a 32% attendance rate with, 466 people actually attending. Some of this could have been that we didn't always have great measures of who attended. These are the people that we could verify actually attended these sessions. And like I said, it's a totally different world than school board school is used to operating in terms of, typically you have your member class and everyone's pretty much at every session for the most part. And so there's some people here that I think could be captured in other ways, even if they don't go to a session, they at least had enough interest to sign up for it. And we asked some really good follow-up questions, I thought, about, we know life happens and, why did you not come? And a lot of people just forgot or had emergencies. And we asked some questions about like, hey, would you watch this after the fact? You're obviously going to lose some interactivity there, but that might be important. So again, when you're doing this first run of evaluation, it's always interesting to see what pops up.
Can I, Erin, I just wanted to jump in there real quick too, to say 2 things about this attendance. One is there were lots of other organizations doing these free short sessions. So we checked in with them and about a 25 to 30% registration to show rate was normal for organizations. That helped us recalibrate how many people we needed to then get to register if we wanted to make sure we had a good session. But then the other thing is, sorry, as I'm saying this, I realize that you guys are like, yeah, we know. Like, that's fine if that's what other organizations thought was okay. But we were like, we're not doing all this work for only 25% of you to show up. So you'll see at the end, we had much higher, 47%, 69% show rates. That's because as a staff, we got together and said, okay, these people clearly are interested. Like, what could we be doing to intervene to help make sure they come? And so we did some much more personal outreach. So Maya was sending personal emails to people saying things like, you are holding a spot that somebody else could be in. It's a limited number of people who can be on this. If you can't make it, let us know. Otherwise, we plan to see you there. And she would send out some of those along the way. And so we did different interventions to get that show rate much higher. So just wanted to point that out as well before we move on to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know, like when I started looking at this and sending preliminary information, I knew Elisa was going to be horrified, like with the show rate, because I've always said school board school is the only organization I've ever worked with that gets 100% response on surveys. Everything I tell her that typically happens in an evaluation, she's like, nope, not here. But this is like she said, this is much more typical. Some of these huge, where 700 people sign up for how to speak at a school meeting. I mean, you'll see these are people from all over the nation, and that's because there were some national organizations that were doing the recruiting, and that feels very different than some of the sessions that were more taught by our local expertise, where you already had the personal connections, and so that even if you had reached out to those 700 people, I don't know that you could have moved that response rate much, because it was just a different group of people. And again, like, this is all great information going forward. I mean, it's still actually probably above average attendance rate overall, but we can also learn to get it even better. When you look at the states represented, there were 31 states represented, and that actually attended one of these sessions, and Washington, D.C. So again, this is a much different map than what we're looking at for the learning program, where we're, mapping school districts or parts of Cincinnati. And, it's always exciting when we get someone from Kentucky. This feels, very different. And I got to learn how to populate maps in Excel. It was a new skill for me as well. So, I had a listing of all the states, and I was like, I want to see it visually. So you can kind of see where we're hitting, which is, to me, incredible, the reach that these had. It's just a very, very different feel than our local program.
Elisa, or Aaron, I just have a question about these 31 states. Do you have any sense of whether these are states that have a lot of activity, a lot of tension, a lot of things going on in the education space, or is that not discernible from? I mean, I'm just wondering if some of these states are just really hot these days in terms of issues.
I think for sure, just even looking at the chat during these sessions, there were definitely, and the questions people were raising, right? Like people in Florida, people in Texas, like there were definitely, that was definitely a hotbed of it. And then even like, we had some people in California who would say things like, my state is blue, but my district is super red and I'm facing these extremists, right? And so I think people were really showing up because there were real issues happening in their community. But then honestly, in some of the, some of the comments, a lot of people would comment things like, I'm a new parent to the public school system, and I came just because I needed to start to get an understanding of how the school system works. And so I think there was certainly a drive given that we were picking topics each month that were hot topics. But also there were people joining because they personally were starting to get involved in stuff happening in schools.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yep. That's a great question. It is interesting how they're kind of clustered, like not a lot in the Mountain West, not a lot in the Deep South, other than Florida, which, so. All right. So this is where we looked at kind of what was happening before versus after the session. And so what we did was because again, all these sessions measured different things, so we didn't want to do this by objective. But Maya and Elisa said, these items measure knowledge, these items measure skills, these items measure mindset, and these items measure confidence. And then anytime we could pair someone pre to post, this was a little bit of the nightmare when you didn't have the pre, or no, you didn't have all the posts, like the matching was interesting. We'll do it differently going forward, but we still got pretty big ends for most of these. And you can see kind of the percent change just in a, hour and a half, 2-hour intervention is pretty spectacular in terms of people were feeling like they knew more, they had more skills, their mindset was different, and they were much more confident about what they were going to do. Everything in school board school, I always put this on there, but just remember, we always measure agreement on a 1 to 6 scale. We don't give people a middle option. So they have to either, if they're in the middle, they have to either somewhat disagree or somewhat agree. So when you're looking at these, and 6 is always strongly agree. So you'll be looking at a lot of these means, and 6 is always the highest. And like I said, there's no middle point. So that's interesting. So we know, okay, they came, they learned and did some things while they were there and felt better leaving. But what actually, and then were they satisfied? We always ask a net promoter score. 137 attendees responded if they would recommend attending a session like this to people they know, and 94.2% of people strongly agreed or agreed, with a mean of 5.65. We've talked a lot about maybe the 6-point scale is hard because we're always at the top of it. It's hard to show growth when you're already at a 5.65. People obviously are pretty satisfied with what they got in these interventions. So then we want to start trying to capture what actions are people taking because of what's happening in the session and what they're gaining. And so we now have a kind of whole series of questions we ask about anything from, as simple as, did you share this information out? To, did you, speak at a school board meeting? Did you contact an elected official? Those kinds of things. And so you can see that we asked people after the session, or we asked people, did you do this during the session? Because a lot of these sessions were designed that people started these actions right away. So they started, writing their speech for hearing of the public, because we know they're probably not going to finish it in an hour and a half session, but, getting something started is more likely that they will continue it. And then we followed up with, in the follow-up survey of people after all the sessions, have you done these things now, or do you still plan to do them? And you see these numbers of the things, and depending on what session they took, this could be 6 months after, this could be 1 month after, because we sent this survey out this summer, but the percentage of people that are saying, I am going to do these, either I have done these things or I am going to do these things, is incredible. You have almost 100% who have attended a school board meeting. You have, 93% that have volunteered or donated to a campaign. You just, the amount of action that has happened because of these sessions. Now, obviously, we can't, correlation is not causation, right? Like, if we put anyone in these sessions, would this happen? They had to be somewhat motivated if they signed up for the session and attended the session. But we can say school board school is all about building these coalitions of people. Wow, people are out there doing things. Are the right people attending these things? I would say absolutely, because what's happening is all of these actual actions in the long term. So, and again, we're talking about some of these people only attended one 90-minute session. And so it's exciting to be able to kind of capture this, like I said, what's going to happen in terms of synergy. Okay, so that's the end of talking about those public sessions. I'm going to move into the Advocate for Education Day. And I'm going to follow the same thing. Who was there? What did they, get from the experience? And then what did they do because of it?
Aaron,
sorry.
This is Michael Dantley. Can I just quickly ask a question? Because I'm kind of fascinated about, was there a difference in content between the two? What do school boards do and what the heck do school boards do that made the difference? Was there a change in content?
That's an Elisa question.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say dramatically, but I will say yes, in terms of keep getting better at this, right? So the change in name was, we partnered with Red, Wine, and Blue for the second one, and they're a hoot. Like, you can just tell by the name of that organization, right? And so they renamed it What the Heck Does a School Board Do? I think it is much catchier of a title. And so we just got better, quite frankly, of, what is it that people are responding to from this session the first time. We cut it down so it was a little shorter, so it was kind of much more condensed of what they needed. And then one of the things we learned in that, we ended up doing 3 more of these sessions after this series. And so one of the great things from this series was our name got out there to, I think, 2,500 people registered for those first 7, right? And so people just knew who we were and what we were doing on a much larger scale. And so we had a number of statewide or national organizations reach out to us and say, can you do that, like a similar session to that one for our organization? We'll blast it out, to everyone. And so we refined it again from there. And we're able to actually include a part, because it was right before the elections, school board elections, of like, now that what does the school board do? What questions are you going to ask candidates? And people really, really took to those sessions. We had another more than 1,000 people sign up for just those 3 sessions.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
And sure, before we move forward, I'm sorry, Aaron, were you going to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, sorry, let me finish this. That's what I was going to say, is there's also a lot more information that we collected, like in the chats of these sessions. We had people represent kind of who, or ask people, are you a parent? Are you a concerned community member? And I didn't present all that today. It is in the report, but that was kind of that data that helped the programming decisions improve. So.
And
Sorry,
Aaron, I was going to ask in this bit, oh no, thank you. I apologize for interrupting you. I was going to ask, and perhaps it's in the report that I've not fully read. Do you have like disaggregated data in terms of which of the topics, which of the sessions might have resulted in greater action?
Yeah, I think we really wanted to do that. The problem is because of, I mean, it just seemed like there were probably only 3 sessions that ended up having enough data to really work with. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like going forward, I mean, this is amazing for a first stab, but I think I would really love to see those kind of, where is the needle really moving? And when we get these kind of higher attendance rates and we're asking the same questions pre-post, we'll be able to do that.
And
so yeah, we don't have it yet, but we need to.
And did your target attendance, in terms of looking for a sample size, is it 100 attendees would be sufficient, or is there some other number, 50?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on how big the change is,
Okay.
honestly. So my guess is we probably wouldn't need 100. I mean, I always like 100 for me is kind of always the rule of thumb. But I think we're going to absolutely get there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I think before we go into the conference too, I'll just say in terms of what we've already been talking about, in case it's helpful, because Aaron is mentioning a few times here, one of their challenges was getting clean data because we were partnering with so many other organizations. So we didn't always have control over things like, were they using Eventbrite to get people to register versus were they using something else? And so we're getting data in all these different formats and all. And so one of the things that we started doing with those 3 that I mentioned that we did in October is at the registration stage, we were just asking for really basic information like your zip code, right? Something super simple that no matter who was handling registration, they could put that in there. And then we were doing a poll when people logged on to get that pre-data on where were they with the different objectives, and then doing a poll at the end to get how much they grew in those things. So we knew it was the same people they were answering these questions because they were right there on the call with us, and we could control exactly how we were asking the question and getting the data back. So I think like we're trying to get much better at collecting clean data as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, there were 7 sessions and it was done 7 different ways. So it was kind of a little bit of a challenge, but we learned. And trust me, I was sweating it when my grad student and I were going through it all. I was like, oh gosh, are we going to get anything out of this? So when we started actually, putting it into these tables, I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually really good for, and imagine what we could have when we are able to kind of clean that up in important ways. So lots of lessons learned. Okay, well, speaking of, I started with that because, like I said, that was kind of messy. We had a lot of control over Advocate for Education Day. So this happened in October. Again, School Board School is always kind of thinking ahead. How can we get information that's going to help us along the way and information about what's going to happen at the end? So I was involved pretty early on this. We did a lot of in-session polling that was helpful, I think, to the presenters in terms of like, okay, everyone do this, quick form, and then we'll display the results of who's in the room or what questions you have. And so there's a lot of really rich information programmatically from this evaluation. But again, I just kind of tried to pull out the big stuff. And then if you look at the actual report, there's a lot more detail. So we had 3 kind of similar data points for this methodology as well. When the conference attendees registered, they filled out a school board school Eventbrite. So we kind of knew what kind of information we were collecting from people at the front end. In the conference sessions, we did these polls, and then we had an end of conference survey that people took at the very end of their experience. So 111 people registered and 87 people attended. And the people who did present also registered, so they're included in that. But I think Maya and Elisa were like, well, let's just be clear that some people were there truly just as participants, and some people were there more kind of in the presenter role. So again, this looks like an attendance rate much more similar to school board school, where, you know, most of the people who are saying they're going to be there were there. When we asked people to respond to these statements, both when they registered for the conference, so kind of a pre-measure, and then at the end of the conference. And so there's a variety of statements. And not surprisingly, there were some that people already endorsed highly coming in. You know, I believe my voice should matter. I think, you know, it's hard to imagine spending a day at a conference if you think your voice doesn't matter. So that's one where we don't see a huge increase because of the population that's going to be attracted to this, but it still went up. I mean, and again, this is on a 6-point scale. There's no place to go when you're at a 5.5. But what's remarkable is to look at, you know, so people clearly had that feeling that their voice should matter, but what they learned were these skills of how their voice can matter. You know, I'm struck by the 40.5% increase, and I know how I can advocate at the state level. You know, people came in not very sure about that and left much more sure that they knew how to do that. So, so clearly, again, this is a one-day intervention. So we started with those sessions that were an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now we're looking at a whole day, and how people have kind of changed because of it and what they've gained. And then the question is, okay, what are you going to do with it? And so again, we have these, I think, incredibly high percentages of people who are leaving really motivated to go out and do the work. You know, they're going to ask a school board candidate a question. They're going to talk to people in their network about how important the school board's election is. So, you know, this is one part of the model of school board school. But, you know, when you're running an election awareness campaign, you just, you know, you now have almost 100 people who are leaving saying, I'm ready to talk about this in a really meaningful way, not at a surface level, because I really understand the issues. I understand how to encourage people to actually do these things. And then we also asked the Net Promoter Score question. And I mean, again, I, as an evaluator, have never seen 100% endorsement rate, but not surprisingly, school board school got it. So 100% of participants strongly agreed they would recommend the conference to people they know. So because this is the first year of a conference, again, there were lots of partners that worked with this. This is all information that can be used going forward to kind of have that ripple effect of, wow, like I signed up for this conference. It was the first time. I know some of these organizations and I know they're good, but I don't know what this conference is actually going to look like. Clearly people left like really happy with what happened there. And like I said, really motivated to go out and do the work. So the overall mean for that was 5.83 out of 6. I think it was like 83% strongly agreed. So even of that 100%, most of them were at the strongly agree level instead of agree level, which is just remarkable, I think. I feel like Maya should put that like in your like, have like a little frame of that. Because I mean, the conference was so much work. I mean, there were so, and just like the others, you know, there were so many times, and I'm only on the fringes of it, but where we had these meetings and we're like, okay, we're going to do these in-session polls, and what's the best way to do it, and where are we going to put it in the slide deck, and how are we going to, you know, present the results? I mean, there were so many logistics to think through. But the thing that I loved is in those meetings, you know, it was Maya and Elisa at that time, that we'd be meeting, and it was just like, no, this is, you know, we want people to be able to see who's in the room. We want the presenters to know what questions, you know, how are we going to make this happen? And we did, and got really good information that even though people loved this conference and were clearly very satisfied, you know, that are going to make future conferences even better. There's a lot of kind of program specific questions, like I said, that I just didn't include in here, but we had a wrap-up meeting with all of the organizers, and the questions that came out were amazing in terms of how are we going to use this information to make things even better. So that's the end of my formal presentation. Like I said, the reports themselves, the first one has the overall session information. And then for each session, we have lots of information. So it's like 80 some pages of information. So I'm happy to talk about any of that, but I wanted to try to give you an overview of what these evaluations looked like.
So I have a question. Of the 55 participants who are not presenters, were many of those not alumni, not members? So they were new to sort of this work?
Yeah, most people who came were not school board school members.
Okay.
And then even the reason we were counting presenters too is because those were people who are going to likely come to this event, even if we didn't ask them to present, right? So people who are interested enough in education. And so they still were there all day and they were still going through the sessions. And so we wanted to make sure we captured their data as well. But yeah, of, almost 90 people who were there, we definitely had some of our members there, which is always fun and wonderful. But most of them were people who.
So then my follow-up question is, because I know that Andrea, you're working with members, and I think if I recall, you've sort of divided, their work into sort of 5 buckets, if I'm not mistaken. So to help people who attended, who aren't part of the member group, sort of get maybe more motivated or more hooked into or collaborating on their action plans, could they not be included in these 5 buckets of work that you're doing with alumni? So they're not technically alumni, but they're like ad hoc people who have the same vision or desire to help in these 5 areas. Would that not be a great way to sort of help these people actually execute on their action plans, so to speak? I don't know. I just wonder if that would be helpful, if that's too much work.
I will say that School Board School was thinking exactly along those lines, because in all of these post-session surveys, they basically said, what else would you be willing to do? Do you want to do a 6-month intensive program? Do you want to view these, short 1-hour modules online? Would you come to a conference? And so I exported all that information for Andrea so that when, it comes time to do X, Y, or Z, we now have a list of people who have already committed to being interested in that. So that's one piece of it. But I know there's more programming that you're talking about, Leslie. So.
Yeah,
Well,
and I would say
like,
there, I
it's
think
like it's what I think I'm thinking of is, how do you create movements within these 5 buckets? And yes, while you have 100 alumni, sorry, I keep calling them alumni, they're members.
yeah.
But you can grow that group of people to create a movement within one of those 5 bucket areas. And maybe it's attending a school board meeting around a certain particular issue, or maybe it's going to Columbus as a cohort, not just an individual to advocate for certain things. I don't know, but it's hard to create a movement on your own. But I just think that you've got a real opportunity here to bring together those who were new to school board school with alumni who already have had these sessions, and just bump your numbers in terms of, because numbers will speak loudly.
Yeah, I think it's great to even so they came from all over. I know in the report, Aaron included zip codes too. And so that's probably helpful as well to look at. I think one of the things we always, as you know, as you've been around literally forever, is we just run into capacity issues, right? I think that is the dream, exactly what you're describing. I think Andrea has more than a full-time job just trying to activate our 100+ members right now around the things we want them doing. But I think this is a really interesting idea of how do we go back through the registration information and figure out who is in CPS, and how could we, so CPS, I'm thinking just because I know a lot of the stuff that we're doing is around CPS, and how could we bring them back in to some of the things. So if Andrea's doing asking folks to show up at a CPS meeting, she could easily reach out to that group as well. So maybe they're a little lower touch point, but they're still in the universe. That's
I'm also thinking of the example of the person who I don't remember if she was I think she was she's a member, but who went and campaigned for the folks at Lakota, trying to get that one person off. Well, were there other people from that same zip code who, instead of one person trying to do that, you now have 10 people who could have gone and helped advocate against, the rabble rousers at Lakota.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm done.
Oh, that's great.
That's
And
great.
Andrea, you're writing too, and I'm writing down too as a next step of like, what could we pull from that? Because I think one of the other things is, we're about to start doing the planning for class 6. And so these people are obviously on our list for who we're going to recruit for our next class as well. Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think we really heard from people, and that is, I think a signature of what we do is like the experts are true experts. Right. And so I think that was one of the things we heard was like the time was really well spent, even if it was, these hour-long breakout sessions. You had true experts on these issues. And so I think that piece was just really strong. And then Maya worked with them all to make sure that their sessions were really tight. I think probably everybody on this call has been asked to do sessions for different conferences. And sometimes it's just the Wild West where you're like, oh, they asked me about this like broad topic. No one talked to me again. I could be talking about anything at this conference and nobody would know. And so I think some people were surprised when Maya was like, your draft of your outline is due by this date. Then we're going to meet and talk about it. And then,
We have slides that we need you to put in your presentation.
Yeah. We're like, that's not interactive enough. We don't.
Yes.
Don't talk at people for an hour. How are you going to get the group involved? And so I think that part, I think Aaron, you pointed out one of the comments that had us laughing. It was something like, this was like it's something about like, this is a conference with the school board school feel and culture to it, right? Like it was, yes, it was very clear that it was still our tone here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so Aaron, thank you so much. I think we've got 15 minutes left here. And I think for what I was hoping to do in the rest of our time here, I know I had put in here some that I'm going to present on election awareness campaign data, but like we actually just don't even have that all back yet. So we will hold on to that for another meeting, and we don't have another school board campaign for 2 years. And so that's okay. But just as a heads up there, Murmuration is still working on that. They just like a week ago got the, I don't know what they call it, validated data from the State Board of Elections, like that just came through. So they are just now doing the analysis of our campaign. So we'll circle back with that. What I did want to get this group's feedback on is, when we're talking about the future of this work. Oh, thank you, Aaron, for the presentation. So
there's a link to it. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out, but you probably don't want me for the rest of this, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a good call. You don't have to. You're welcome to stick around. But thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Yeah. A pleasure as always.
That's great. Thank you. And I will put Aaron's presentation in our folder as well. So it'll be in the minutes. So I think, really what I wanted to bring to this group too is as we are figuring out our budget for next year, our structure, is, how do we keep this work going? This was really lots of proof of concept stuff of us saying like, well, we're going to try this new thing this year, this new thing this year. Let's see what the results of this are. And I think as you saw here, the results were like, this stuff was all working and is aligned with our mission, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that this board has always been very good about is saying like, is this mission creep or is this aligned with our mission? And so I think this is very clearly like we are activating people around civic engagement in their school districts and helping bring them into this much larger network and coalition. And so our structure for next year, as we are proposing it, this is all, until it's approved by the board at the annual meeting, this is, all kind of just what's proposed right now. I'm going to share my screen though, so that we can kind of see what that is, so that we can just share kind of where, sorry, let me get this, where this work will live. So I think as we know, we're going to have our new executive director, my new role, kind of supporting that. And then in the Cincinnati work, we'll have this managing director hopefully kind of overseeing all of the Cincinnati work. We're hoping we have the funding for that. And then we've got Andrea and Maya leading the team here in all of the programming. So Andrea working with all of our members and our medium and long-term goals. And then Maya doing all the behind the scenes work for the learning program. So for this coming new class. And then Andrea and Maya are working together right now to plan Advocate for Education Day. I know it seems like that is far away. As we all know, with an event this huge, it is not. Suddenly you're like, oh, it's almost April. We need to be planning. So they've already got a project plan going there. One of our lessons learned from last year was even with really great partners, it was too much for just Maya to be running all of the curriculum and the programming and the logistics and. And so Andrea and Maya are dividing up the work to make sense within their roles, right? So like we had a number of our members who were the experts. And so Andrea can help be working with them, for example. And then what I've also built into our budget that will hopefully be approved next month is having a consultant do all of the operations work, right? So somebody else who can help with all of those logistics. So meeting with, ordering lunches, making sure those are on time, getting name tags printed out, working with our site contact to make sure the rooms are set up right. All of that stuff that's so important to an event going well and takes up so much time. We feel like we can outsource that and let Maya and Andrea focus on the content, which is like where we really need to be leading that work. And so that's kind of how we see the conference being able to be staffed next year. As you'll see, like this other piece, oh, Leslie, did you have a question?
Yeah, so where is that person sit?
The consultant?
Operations, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's just a consultant. So that'll be like, that's just a short-term consulting person.
Okay.
Hire. I will say to this group here too, because this is pretty exciting. So, so Nicole Mora, who was like my right hand in starting school board school, she has recently started her own consulting company where she does planning for events. So she was at this conference last year too. So she is a natural, really strong fit to be the consultant we hire to help with that work. So that'll be a short-term consultant that we'll bring in as we get a little bit closer to the conference itself. On the public sessions, that's just like a bigger question. Someday, we would love to have on the kind of left side of this chart, a director of programs who's helping lead any of the work that is not related to the learning program. So we have Annie and Lanisha who are going to be doing all the curriculum and coaching work for our new sites around the learning program. But we know we have all of this other programming that we just proved people want and that we did really well. And so we kind of don't want it to just go away. And so what I think may work is, let me see, if I change to this, do you guys now see a budget doc or do you not? I can't see what you see. Yeah, you do. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to bring as a possibility to this group to just see what you think about this idea and then any other thoughts you have is these lines 18 and 19 here as how we can keep this work rolling. We know we do not. There's no world where we have the money to hire a full-time person to lead this work. We just don't right now. We have to face that reality. And so one option could be that to keep this rolling, we hire a contractor to lead a certain number of sessions or certain type of sessions. So what Maya was doing with our team this year was like each month we were developing an entirely new thing that was responding to the moment. We can't keep that. That's not what this would be. What we learned over the course of the year is that there were really 4 sessions that we are experts in and that are replicable, right? Like we could do pretty easily for many different organizations with just slight personalization. That was what does a school board do? How do you speak compellingly at a school board meeting? the organizing your network, and then kind of this like putting together your pitch is kind of like speaking at a school board meeting. They're very similar. And so what we could do here is, as we kind of have those as like, that's our menu of options. If someone comes to us and says, will you, so for example, CPS HR team has come to me to say, we want to hire you to come in and do some sessions. I have no idea why my thing's giving a thumbs up, you guys. It's like very strange. But anyway, we want you to come in and do sessions for our lead teachers on advocacy. And so I said, great, here are the sessions we could do. And I gave them the series of 3 sessions. And so that's what this consultant would do. When organizations come to me and say, can you do a session for our people on X? We say, here are the 4 sessions we do. The consultant meets with them. They can personalize it slightly. This is not revamps, right? This is like listening to what that organization really needs and personalizing it to that organization. And we pay them about $150 an hour to do that kind of personalization. And then we use a train the trainer model where we train people in how to run these sessions. And then we pay them somewhere between $100 and $200 a session, depending on the length of the session, to actually do that session. And so we would have kind of this cadre of people that are equipped to do it, and we can keep this work moving. And with, it's definitely money, but it's not a full-time salary. With about $15,000, we can kind of test this coming year. If this is, what the market wants, can we do this really well in this way? So that was the idea I had anyway for how we keep this going and going at the quality that we always demand out of anything we do, without having the funding yet to bring someone on full time. So I will stop there. And in our last few minutes, get any thoughts?
I think it's a really good approach. I think I do consulting for the chambers, many of you know, and I think it just allows space for people who have part-time jobs or, full-time jobs, are wanting to take something else on that might hit home a little bit more. So I think it's a really good opportunity for them, and the pay seems fair, I think. So I think it's a good approach to it.
I was going to say, I think it'd be great for a member who wants to get more involved, but maybe doesn't have, a whole time for giving a full-time job or a part-time job. Like a member who's like really interested in the work. That might be a good way to go for it.
Yeah, Yeah, and I've had a couple of like sitting school board members who I know just from this like school board world say to me, like, are there ways I could get involved? Is there, are there things I could do? And so that's where I'm seeing this like train the trainer, where we train them to run one of these sessions on what does a school board do? So it's not always me and Maya, right? Like we train someone else to be the me and Maya. And obviously they watch us do it once, we watch them do it, we give them feedback, and then they're off and running.
Lisa, I kind of like this idea. It's not a permanent position, and it's contractual, and it does get the work done, the necessary work that needs to be accomplished. So at first glance, I think I really do like this idea.
It's great. All right. Well, then that is what I'll be proposing then in our upcoming budget. And so I think that could be really exciting. And like I said, I've got some like school board folks who've reached out. I've also just had some like people who do curriculum, and it's so funny. They'll email these emails in my inbox or like DMs in different like LinkedIn or whatnot, being like, I just think your work is so interesting. This is what I do. Is there some way for me to get involved? And so I've just been having kind of lots of one-off conversations with people to start to understand their skills, to figure out like, okay, to Michael's point, like we can't have permanent positions yet. Like, where could I be leveraging some of these people who want to be involved and and who I'm learning their skills.
Right.
And Lisa, I'm sure you know Audrey from the chamber. She would be really great. That's how, like, very similar to how the consultants are with the workforce. So she might be able to provide some structure before you guys like recreate anything.
Oh, that's so smart. Yeah. All right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today for this. Yeah. And, a big thank you to Maya for leading all of this brand new work. I think that first, wasn't it like your first 3 weeks, you came on staff and we were like, great. So we have a session coming up that 150 people have registered for. Can you please help create this outline and lead this session? Oh, and welcome to
Can you
staff.
make this guide in the next 2 weeks, please? Thanks, that'd be great.
And then can you do this every month without stopping? Yeah.
Well, the only way to learn is baptism by fire, right? Yep.
That's what this was. Yep. Okay, well, thank you so much. The only other thing on the agenda, as you will see, I just don't want to miss out on, is our big education policy pitch night is on the 12th. We are super excited about it. We've got 7 great pitches lined up that are CPS or statewide ideas. The superintendent, school board president, policy committee member, and Dunny, our state rep, are all going to be our panelists. So if you haven't registered yet, in the agenda for today, there's a link to register. And then I know you all have lots of people who are interested in education in your world. Oh, thank you, Andrea. Andrea just chatted in the link. So sending it out to anyone in your world who is interested in education and encouraging them to come. It's always a really fun event. And the audience gets to vote on which idea that they want to see championed. So it's really fun that you actually get a say at the end of the event. You're not just a passive listener. So definitely help spread the word. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.